Arab homes burn in a city once hailed as an example of Jewish-Arab coexistence. Are Israeli Arabs becoming an active front in the conflict between Jews and Palestinians? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Sami Zaidan. Israeli Arab and Jewish community leaders have met President Shimon Peres in Acre following days of violence in the town. Well, President Peres said that Acre was a symbol of peaceful coexistence between Arabs and Jews and should remain so. Well, rioters filled the streets for 4 days after an Arab man was attacked for driving through a Jewish neighborhood on the eve of Yom Kippur. Well, that traditionally no traffic is allowed during what is the most sacred of Jewish religious holidays. Police were forced to use water cannons to break up the crowds, but not before people were forced to flee their homes as 12 Arab houses were set on fire. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert told police to show zero tolerance towards rioters.
The police forces are using their bodies as a buffer to prevent clashes between Arabs and Jews and to prevent any bloodshed. This is our mission. On the other hand, we have arrested 40 Jewish and Arab protesters regardless of their racial background, and we treat them equally as people who broke the law.
Well, tensions remain high and leaders have rushed to denounce the violence amid fears it could spread to other mixed towns and cities. Israel's foreign minister and potential prime minister in waiting, Tzipi Livni, says these kinds of clashes should not continue.
This is something deeper than what actually happened here. We are at a crossroads and now we have to decide which direction to take. In my mind, the only message that has to be relayed today is from national leadership, local leadership, everyone. From now on, we take ourselves in hand, embrace each other together. This isn't just our future, it's the future of everyone here. This is a message that I would expect to hear from every type of leadership, both Jewish and Arab, in the State of Israel.
Well, joining us now to discuss the issue, our guests in Tel Aviv, Yoav Stern. He's an Israeli journalist and the Arab affairs correspondent at Haaretz newspaper. In Nazareth, Jafar Farah, he's director of the Musawah Center. That's an advocacy center for Arab citizens in Israel. And in London, Ian Black, he's Middle East editor at The Guardian newspaper. Thank you all for joining us. If I could start with Yoav, from bulldozer attacks to riots, are we witnessing Palestinians who carry Israeli citizenship or Israeli IDs? Are we witnessing them increasingly becoming a new front line, or an intensified front line rather, in the struggle?
No doubt that what we saw in the last few days was indeed part of the struggle of this conflict that we have in the Middle East between Israelis, between Jews and Palestinians, between Jews and Arabs. I wouldn't say it's the same exactly, because the situation in Acre is a bit different than the one in East Jerusalem or in Jerusalem, talking about the bulldozers you mentioned. I think that what happened in Acre does have a national background. I think that the two communities inside one city share the same life, share the same city, but fight each other in many aspects. We didn't know much about this until it erupted. Only people who live there and only people who are really interested went there and realized that there is a struggle on territory. It's a bit like, if you'd like, about Israel and Palestine as a whole. The two communities, what I would say, fear from each other, fear that they're losing their city, fear that the other side is taking over. And this is what brought us to what we saw. It was at the beginning a very simple thing, but it erupted and became riots. And for several days, the Jews of Acre, especially the Jews of Acre and not the Arabs, were attacking or rioting, you can say, every night against the Arab residents of the city, and of course burned their houses. We all know what happened. The question is, what is the connection between this and the Arab-Israeli conflict? I think there is a connection. If we go back to October 2000, we saw the same thing, the Intifada that started in the Palestinian territories at a time in which we had riots inside Israel and clashes between the police and Arab demonstrators. I think that we cannot say it's not part of the same conflict. At the same time, there is a difference, and the difference is that those are citizens of Israel. They have citizenship. They have other ways to fight the government, if you'd like, other than rioting and other than what we saw the same day on Yom Kippur.
All right, I want to bring in now Jafar Farah, and we'll get into sort of the underlying causes here and whether it was really about Yom Kippur or not in a minute. But first I want to ask, what's the possibility, Jafar, of this sort of trouble spreading to other areas, to other mixed towns and cities?
I think the roots are there. You have to take in consideration that incitement against the Arab population is taking place by political leaders in the first class, ministers, ex-ministers, and Knesset members. There is incitement in the press against the Arab population. If you take what's happening in Carmel, in Natseret Eilit, in Lud and Ramli, in Yafo, you have the roots of confrontations between Jews and Arabs.
Right, but if we could first get into the possibilities of this spreading to other areas, and let's try and delve into the roots of it a little later on in the show, if we may, Jafar.
Yes, the option is there. Acre wasn't surprised. For the last 3 years, political leaders were watching Acre closely, and they know that Acre is a place that can feed such confrontations. Yes, if you take Lud and Ramli, you see the same tensions exist there between populations, and you see politicians that are feeding the tensions. What happened in Acre is reminding us in Belfast. This is what's happening in Acre. Actually, we talk about neighbors that have been attacking their Arab neighbors, and we talk about 12 Arab families that have been evacuated physically. And I just came now from the police station. The police don't send police forces to the Jewish neighborhoods to help the Arab families. They just evacuated the Arab families, and there is a separation now in Acre, that there is neighborhoods that are clean from Arabs. And this is exactly what Lieberman and his people and F.E.Tam politicians in the Knesset are calling for, to transfer the Arab population from Israel in general, to transfer the Arab population in the mixed cities. And we will see more and more events. If you take since October 2000 until now, we are in ongoing escalation in the tensions between Jews and Arabs, feeded by governmental and officials, especially police forces.
All right, let's bring in Ian Blackett. It was interesting there, Ian, that Jafar made the comparison to Belfast. Is this a sort of, I guess you could say, a classic struggle between two peoples for the same territory, the same land, in which the government is not able or is not in a position to really be impartial?
Well, I mean, clearly it seems to me that the background to what's been happening in Acre the last few days is quite clearly the state of the conflict, the wider conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. There's no question that without seeing it against that backdrop, we can't understand it. Now, there have been lots of references to coexistence between Arabs and Jews inside Israel. I think it's fair to say that although there is a degree of coexistence in a number of places, fairly restricted number of places, the cities and towns that have been mentioned, that coexistence is not much more than skin deep. It can be fairly fragile. And when the political circumstances are in a sort of an alignment that increases the sense of distrust and of distance, then quite a small spark, clearly the sort of thing that happened in Acre with the Yom Kippur incident, then quite a small spark can ignite something quite a lot bigger and a lot fiercer. But there's no question that the background to this is the ongoing failure to resolve the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, and the changing perceptions on both sides as the prospect of resolving that conflict become, I think you would have to say, ever more remote.
Right, Yoav, are officials here simply failing to resolve conflict, or are they pouring fire on the conflict? I'm sure you heard what Jafar was saying a moment ago, and others have been saying that the government giving out incentives to settle Israelis in Acre, particularly opening yeshivas, religious schools, and moving students there, has been a bad thing for Acre.
I think that what the government has been doing, or the local government and the municipality has been doing in recent years to, let's say, to make the Jewish community in Acre stronger, was not beneficial, or not very beneficial to coexistence, if you can call it like this, in Acre. I think that the government as a whole is not paying enough attention to the Arab population inside Israel. I think that this goes back to the fact that the Arabs are always in the opposition. So if you say for moral reasons we should give them money, we should give them budgets, we should support their cultural theaters, etc., etc., this is not done because their political power is really low and they're on the marginal. They are marginal to the political scene in Israel, and they want to stay there. They don't want to be part in what they would say the occupation government of Israel towards their brothers, the Palestinians. And you know how it works in democracies or wherever, not only in democracies. You must have a political power in order to get budgets. You must be in negotiations to get into the government in order to get your share in the cake. And this never happens with the Arabs. So we are talking about a Prime Minister, Olmert, Ehud Olmert, that was declaring things that no Prime Minister before has said, like that the discrimination against the Arabs has been going on internally into the governmental system for 60 years. Can he change it? I'm not sure he can. Change will only come if there is a change in the political power share. This is not, I cannot see it in the future. I think that the politicians might at some point, like Ehud Olmert did, understand that it's not for the benefit of the Israeli Arab citizens to give them budgets, but rather for the benefit of the state of Israel as a whole, Jews and Arabs, so that to give the right budgets and to appoint the people to the right positions and to share power with the Arab population. It's for the interest of the Jewish people inside Israel. It's very difficult for people who sit in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem to understand this. Power sharing is very difficult. I think,
right.
I think that maybe what we saw those days in those events, those very harsh events in Acre, might help people understand it better.
Well, we're going to have to take a short break now, but when we do come back, can Israel be a Jewish state and a democracy for all of its citizens at the same time? That question and more when we come back. Stay with us.